Hello, everyone, and welcome to a wonderful new episode of the StudioMEcast. Today, I have another special guest. We have director, editor, and writer Simon Barracchini. In our previous episode, we had Kathleen Regan, who talked a bit about a feature that she's just completed, and we mentioned Simon a few times, and here he is. And
Hello.
We're going to continue that conversation and just talk a bit about Simon with Simon and all the rest of it. So I'll just say, Simon, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Peter. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Welcome back to Pittsburgh as well.
Yeah.
How does it feel to be back?
It's great. It's definitely not as hot as Tampa right now. Being from Pittsburgh, you think that, summers get hot until you go down in Florida and you walk outside and at 4 a.m. and it's already 80 degrees and 90% humidity. So I'll take, the weather here was turning into a nice fall, a little breeze coming through.
Today was
morning.
the first day that I felt the fall chill. As I went outside, I was like, oh boy, it's starting, so
Yeah, loved
that's
it.
good. So your film, Godless Children.
Yes, sir.
Let's start with that, and then we can maybe get, just further back into the things you've done and all that, but that's what I've talked about recently, so I feel fresh with it.
Okay,
So,
great.
Godless Children, at the time of this recording, you're going to be having the cast and crew screening this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Is this your first feature film?
Yes, it is actually my first feature as a director. I have worked on a feature as an editor previously, but never my own projects that I create or, have a really big hand in. So yes, as a director, as a writer, as a producer, this is my first feature.
Now, my interaction and knowledge of you has mostly been through you as an editor.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it was before you started this production, which, sorry. Now, is directing what you got into film for, or was it editing and moved to that? How would you say?
Yeah, like a lot of people, and it's funny too, when you go into film school, the first day, you go into film school, and at least for me, my professor said, all right, who here wants to be a director? And everyone's hands raise up. And then, by the end of your time, 4 years or however long you go, you start to see that those hands start going down. For me, it was always up. It's something that I really enjoy and I find great value in creatively. It's a chance to collaborate with a lot of different people. When you're on a film set, you do have, collaboration across all different departments, no matter who you are. You could be, a grip or a best boy, or you could be in hair and makeup or costumes. You do have to interact with all the different departments, but director's that one where you kind of have to be knowledgeable of all different areas, but you don't necessarily have to be a master of all areas. You have to be a good person, like people person, and good at knowing how to shift those pieces in the puzzle so that they fit just right. And that for me is just what I enjoy the most out of directing. And also the other big thing that I love is working with actors. Growing up, I really wanted to be an actor. And I used to joke around that, like, when I turn 40, I'll become a director because I'll be too old. But it kind of slowly morphed into, well, I do still love acting. I do still love finding character and emotion and intention. But the thing is that I realized early on that, I'm not going to be, this big time actor. And where could I still find that love? And that was on the other side of the camera. As a director, having that interaction with actors and finding those moments and finding those characters, that's where it really grew for me.
And I imagine, if I make an assumption, please correct me, because I love to learn, but I imagine that the writing has really helped join the whole directing and acting passions that you have together.
Funny thing is like writing really comes from, and there are some great filmmakers out there, especially, but one in particular that always, like, a quote that I kind of, I'll butcher right now, but I believe it came from James Cameron, which is like, come up with an idea, grab a camera, shoot it, and then now you're a director, and now you're just negotiating, salary after that. So I just completely butchered that quote.
I think I know.
But
You did
the
well
general
enough that I
gist-
recognize it for sure. So, and I believe the message, the spirit of it is still there.
And the gist is that, if you want to tell these stories and you really really want to invest in storytelling, obviously the first thing is the screenplay, and from there it allows you to then morph into the director, and especially at this independent level, or even before then, when you're just with your siblings or friends or whatever, just with a camera. The best way that you can learn to do that is through writing first, is creating those stories and then finding people, bringing them together, and then making them. And so that's where I think writing really bridged the gap, like you said, to directing, and kind of also helped bring acting and that feeling of that I was chasing with acting through the writing, and kind of created those characters that I wanted to be or wanted to see. And then I was able to then, with directing, find the ability to tell those stories, maybe not in front of the camera, but still be able to bring that message across.
Was acting the first thing that you wanted to do?
Yeah. I was fortunate that when I was younger, I was at a school that was a private school, and we had a theater, rather large theater actually, in the school. And every year we would have, like anyone else, school plays. And that was something that I would look forward to all year. And as you got older, they became more and more elaborate. They also became like the junior version of Broadway shows. And so we would do, like, I think one year we did Godspell, another year we did Aladdin. But it was things like that you kind of, for me, I always look forward to, because I always wanted to be something different. I wanted to, step out of my own skin and kind of just be able to just, for an hour, 2 hours, just be someone else and get to run around and experience life in a different viewpoint. And so through that time in school, it allowed me to do that. And that's where I kind of fell in love with the acting side of things. But like I said, quickly after that, realized that maybe that's not the direction I want to go. But that's where it definitely started.
So, the stories that you tell, are they similar to the stories that you like to receive or listen to or watch?
I'd say so. Me personally, I like to tell stories that are a lot more deep thinking and require you to, have a little more intuitive experience rather than just passively watching something, because, not to put something out there, but like a big action movie where you've got a lot of explosions or big CGI moments, they're great. Trust me, I love them just as much as the next guy. But what I like to do with my stories, at least, is find a deeper threshold where you have to start thinking a little bit more, and start kind of, creates, for me, what I like in my stories is be able to have the audience walk out of it and have a deeper question in mind, or think about it, or open a dialogue. Don't necessarily have to like the story, or don't necessarily have to be like, 5 stars, 2 thumbs up, whatever it is. But if they walk out of there, whether positive or negatively, are asking questions or talking about it, that's where I feel like I've done, my work as a filmmaker. And the people that I admire are like Christopher Nolan. He is right now, obviously, at the time of this recording, like Oppenheimer's still, going strong and things like that. But his films, for me, have always been like a benchmark to kind of work towards. Because regardless of the theme or the genre that his films are placed in, there's always a underlying feeling of, a deep understanding of the story, and making you have to really pay attention. And you kind of walk away like, Tenet, people are up and down about that for a while. It was maybe not the best timing, but that story was something that some people were like, I don't quite understand it. Some people were like, had to watch it 3 times, and then it's like, oh my gosh, it's, deeper than I could have thought it was. So same with like Inception or Memento or anything like that. And I'm not necessarily that complex, but
it's an inspiration.
It's an inspiration for sure.
Absolutely. I think Christopher Nolan, and part of this is Oppenheimer going on, but he's probably been definitely the most talked about filmmaker on this podcast so far. Like a lot of people, some people have come on and their favorite movie is Dark Knight or whatever. Or we talk about Dunkirk, which is my favorite Nolan movie. We'll talk about The Prestige, which is the most underrated Nolan movie.
I agree.
Perfect film, totally underrated. Like people don't even know it exists. It's so good. But one of the things that my dad pointed out about Oppenheimer is Barbie's done, like, last I checked, like $700 million. Congratulations, Barbie. And Oppenheimer's done like $400 million or something like that. They're going to be taking Barbie out of theaters like this week or something, which is mind-blowing to me. Like, are they lying? Like, I don't know. It's like, it's the biggest movie. Why are you? But Oppenheimer was set to have 100 days on screens before it reaches streaming.
Correct.
My dad, who's in Texas right now, where they have a 70 millimeter print, he says, you cannot get a seat to the 70 millimeter because it's booked, like, sold out weeks and weeks and weeks in advance. And
love to see it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be doing a road trip out east to the closest one at King of Prussia, but I am gonna see it in 70 mil. I've seen the film twice so far, and
I actually saw it once, and I did see it in the 70 mil, and it's amazing. It's
jealous.
Absolutely amazing.
I'm so jealous.
Highly recommend.
Yeah, if you're fortunate enough to be near 70 millimeter screening, which there was one in Pittsburgh for Dunkirk, and I saw that, and now there isn't one for this. I'm like, Nolan, you made Batman here in Pittsburgh. Can't you get us a projector? Come on, he did it before. I went to see it, whatever. And but that's the thing. He said all the IMAX screenings in 70 and all that, they're all sold out. But if you watch on like another screen, there's nobody there. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting. It's people still want to watch the movie. I'm interested to see how well it does in the longer run. I mean, it's already done great,
Yeah.
But anyway, just something that, we're talking about Oppenheimer for a minute there. I thought I'd throw that little bit of interesting,
It's funny, though, because, like, the way you say that, where, like, the 70 mil is, like, sold out, but, like, the, conventional standard, projection is not necessarily hot take, but I actually saw that IMAX extended the Oppenheimer run, so now they're doing even more showings than they were scheduled to, because there's so many sold out, and it's interesting because that says to me that in the pandemic there was a big worry that theaters are dying, like the theater experience is dying.
Yeah.
Luckily, and rightly so, it hasn't.
Largely thanks to Spider-Man.
And Tom Cruise.
And Tom Cruise. A bunch of good movies just swung or flew in at like the perfect time.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But the thing is like, to see that people are going to see the 70 mil print and not necessarily the standard, tells me that people are more invested in the experience of the true experience of the film, whether it's in IMAX, whether it's in Cinema 4D or 3D, Max or XD, crazy Avatar, like whatever. Audiences are more like inclined to, or at least more educated. I don't think that's the right word, but they are feeling a little more refined. They're not just there just to get away, they're not just there to, toss a couple dollars and sit in the back row and like talk the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
My experience actually when I went to see Oppenheimer, it was actually in New York. And the thing is that when I sat in the theater, it was packed, absolutely packed to the gills. And you expect, like a big crowd like that, there's going to be someone on a phone, there's going to be someone talking, there's going to be rustling popcorn, whatever it is. Dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop the whole 3 hours.
Nice.
And it's like, it's kind of amazing to see, especially as a filmmaker and like yourself. Like, it's kind of a great thing to feel for us, is that the future is bright. Because fans are going to be interested and, attentive enough to your stories. Now, granted, the story has to be good enough to get them to, buy into it. But I think that, fans of films are becoming a lot more stingy or like picky about what they watch, because they want to immerse themselves in that experience.
They want the good stuff.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, I like that. And it's, I think that's a great perspective to have on it too. I hadn't put it into those words at all, but I think you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I've been encouraged by, well, I'd say I love going to the movies more than just about anything I can do, right? And I'll sometimes pick which movies I go to based on if it looks like a big screen movie to me. So much of Oppenheimer is the marketing talking about, we shot this 70 millimeter IMAX, all that. I've seen reels of the film reel, and they're like, this is over 11 miles long and it weighs 600 pounds. It shows the guys like moving. It's like when they're moving the bomb, it's actually very similar. Which I find great. There's some movies that I'll wait. I don't like streaming stuff in general, because I'm definitely a snob for formats. I love 4K so much. If I watch a DVD instead of a Blu-ray, it's rare. Support your local library. Everybody, they've got free Blu-rays. Anyway,
gotta love it.
Animated films in Blu-ray is like the best thing that ever happened. Seeing like Akira in Blu-ray, I was like, I can't imagine watching this on VHS.
I did the same thing.
I love VHS. That's like physical media, just because I'm from the 90s, But like, yeah, I love formats and all. But let's get back to your film and what you've done. I love talking about all the big stuff going on, but Godless Children is the title. And Kathleen is the lead actor in this. I was able to run sound for one day. I forget if I did anything. I was happy to step in.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I was stoked to get the call. And Jesse and I work really closely on a bunch of different things, and he's occasionally slipped me a. I don't know if I should say this. He's sent me like a shot he was working on. He's like, "Hey, look at what I did," and stuff. I'm like, "Oh, dude, this looks nice," So I'm really excited to see it. How are you feeling these days leading up to the screening?
I feel good. It's a little tiring. I think, Kathy and I have both talked about this. It's the hardest thing we ever did. And I'll, reiterate that sentiment because, I've done quite a bit of short films, over time. I've edited other people's films. I did a mini-series of my own, like a 6-episode mini-series for Straight Eye College. Created this whole, it was all historic show. I had like a small budget and, seemed like a big task, but nothing, it pales in comparison to writing and producing and directing your own feature. Just the amount of time, energy, money, stress that kind of goes into that. It's something I've prepared for, and I felt completely unprepared at the same time. It was the greatest learning experience, though, because the trials and tribulations that we went through, had to figure out, work through, the different situations that we were put into, could not have been a better teacher. And you learn from making mistakes. At least, I do for sure. And so after all that time, and it's been about 2.5 years since we first came up with the concept for the story, to now be at this point, it's exhausting, but at the same time rewarding, because now it's like I can fall back in love with that project again. Because when you're in the trenches and working on it at the 11th hour, and just a little insight, I actually did a 17-hour straight race to the finish a little bit just to get it ready for this screening, and unfortunately it's still not 100% completed yet, but just to get it to that point, just wanted to get it where it would be enough for the people involved to feel like, hey, this is what we did, and be proud of the work that they did, because I'm very proud of the work that they provided us, and want them to repay it back to them as best I can. So at this point, just exhausted, excited, but also a little nervous, because again, these are my colleagues, these are my peers, and these are friends. And that's hard to put your, heart and soul out there. And they've been kind of in the darks for a couple months while I've been, tinkering away in post. And so some people have seen little bits and pieces, or some people have, like you said, Jesse, like his visual effects are amazing. You're not going to really notice them as much because it's not really that kind of film, but like where they are, my mind is boggled by the work he's done. But the thing is like, they haven't seen the full film. I'm pretty much one of the 3 people that have seen the full film, 4 people.
So you, Kathy,
me, Kathy, Adam our DP, because he's also a producer as well. And then Charlie Wilkins, our composer, because he has to
of course,
write the score.
Yeah. That's that's got to be one of the coolest gigs, is getting to, because you kind of are the first person to see it done, even in some ways before, if it's a remote thing in particular, like before the air quotes filmmaker gets to see it, because you send it off to them when you're the composer. It's like I didn't actually put that together till like right now. Like that's I mean, unless there's like credits and stuff, I guess. But it depends how you do it, I suppose.
Actually, Charlie in particular, if I can just take a second to talk about him for a second.
Please do, yes.
So I've worked with Charlie for 9 years now, and sheer happenstance that we met on Facebook, because I had put out a Facebook page for my historical, series that I was starting while I was still finishing my senior year of college, and he was in a place where he was looking for more independent work just to kind of build up his reel and, put some projects under his belt. And he came across my page, reached out to me through the page and said, "Hey, my name is Charlie Wilkins, from Manchester, England. Would you be interested in, needing a composer and whatever?" And I'm thinking, yes, I would love composer, because for me, I have a decent music background, having played several instruments, and my family has a good musical background. But something I enjoy a lot besides filmmaking, if I wasn't in filmmaking, I'd be in music. And so I'm like, great, this is awesome. But I'm like, what's the catch? Like there has to be something. Like it's going to cost me an arm and a leg? What is it? Especially being in another country. And he was like, no, I just want to do it. And so I look at his website, and his music was amazing. And there was this one piece in particular that I kept listening to on repeat, because it was almost exactly what I wanted for that series. Like the same sound, like very kind of historic sounding, very rich. John Williams-esque meets Hans Zimmer kind of feel. And so I was like, this is great. And so we started on that project, and we've probably done between short films, commercials, corporate stuff, probably close to 50 projects together.
Wow.
In 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and the number keeps growing. And so, funny enough, we actually just met in person for the first time a couple months ago.
Wow.
Yeah, so we met down in Florida.
That's crazy.
Anyway, like, he's been one of the greatest collaborators I've had in film ever, and he actually just this past week gave me the greatest gift I've ever received in filmmaking ever. Crunching, getting down to the nitty gritty with this film, in pre-production, Kathy and I came up with the idea that we would love to have a live scoring session. It's a goal of mine in life to sit in the control room and see a whole orchestra playing your music for your film. I mean, it's just, I find that that's like one of the greatest, feelings, is just seeing that. And I was trying to budget it. We researched both here in Pittsburgh and around the world, in Europe and the UK. Nothing really seemed to fit into the budget, or just no one got back to us. So it seemed like it was kind of dead in the water. And then basically what Charlie does is he'll use like MIDI and different samples and stuff, or some live recordings of occasional solo players, and mix them all together, and it sounds absolutely beautiful. Mm-hmm. So I was expecting that, and then just this past week he sent me an email on Sunday and was like, "Hey, just wanted to let you know I booked a 2-hour session to do the score." And I was like, "What? This is amazing. Great." I'm thinking it's in the UK, because he's in Manchester and he does some work, around like Abbey Road Studios. And I'm like, whoa, this could be huge. And so I was like, all right, cool. And he was very kind and set it all up and got it all together. We come to the day of the recording session. Of course, I'm not there. So I could go on a Zoom link, and he sends me the Zoom link and everything, and he sends me a message and says, "Actually, I'm in Budapest." He was in Budapest at Budapest scoring, and there were 17 musicians set up, and we had the whole 2 hours of just our music, and I got to sit there and watch on a Zoom call basically the whole scoring stage, and just listen to the music being played by these masterful musicians. And I nearly cried. It was absolutely amazing, because it was something that I had pictured I would love to do someday. And having gone through trying to find this at one point, and then just to have it happen and not realize it was going to happen, and just one day just turn on a Zoom call and boom, these people are playing your music. It's just amazing. Wow. So yeah, got to have that happen. Unfortunately, it's not going to be in the screening. We didn't make it in time.
I can't wait to hear this.
Yeah, we didn't make it in time for the screening, but it will be in the final film. But yes, they were able to in 2 hours pretty much knock out the entire film. At least the big bits. So
wow, that's incredible. That's good on you, man. That's what a cool experience.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
It was really a lot of fun to see, and very emotional for me. But it's things like that. And that through this filmmaking process, there've been some bad moments, but there's been some really great moments, and I like to take both and learn from both, but also, what we've received not only just in making this film is the people that have been involved and the things that we've done in terms of learning about ourselves and learning the scope of what we can do, the scope of storytelling that we can do, but also logistics and locations and different things that have come through making of this film have been just instrumental and fantastic, because now whenever this film, wherever it goes and however it goes, will be great to see, but it's also just a little bit of a springboard to the next one. And take those lessons and things we've learned and the things we've garnered from the making of this film can take us into hopefully the next idea.
Absolutely. So now you've mentioned a couple times the film's not 100% done.
Mm-hmm.
So did you plan to have it done before this screening, or did you kind of going in when you set the date? How's that come about?
Yeah, so when we set the date, it was more of an idea it was going to be an unfinished cut. That was the initial idea. Is just like, it's not going to be a finished one, but we're going to try to get it as close as we can.
Well, why do the screening now instead of, I don't know, months later when you've had more time?
Because right now, basically the way I look at it is, like, if you look at independent film in general, in the past, I've been involved with some projects where you don't see it for 2, 3, 4 years maybe. Or some people, it's like, it might be 5, 6, 7 months, and you kind of forget about it. People move away, get locked up in other projects, whatever.
Yeah.
And you don't have time to get to it. And then you get a little screening link, or, you may be lucky enough to go to a festival or something to view it, but it's not always the case. And sometimes I've worked on projects that I've never seen, and so it was kind of, for us, we really wanted to make sure that the people involved get a chance to see it as close to being finished, if not finished, in the biggest format possible that we could give them, and that's in a theater. And so we wanted to kind of find a way, and it's almost pretty close to almost a year from when we started production. We started production in October. This is going to be the end of August. So, we're trying to give them, like, not too much longer to wait. To see the fruits of their labor. And so it's kind of like a big thank you to them. And then when it comes out in its entirety, and really it's not that far off. It's just a little bit of audio tweaking and some color. But when it's in its entirety, we're also going to share it again if they want to view it again, see it as complete picture. But in this process, at least there'll be a chance for everyone to sit down as a group and as almost like a family, sit down and watch it. And that's something we wanted to give back to the people who generously gave their time and their energy and their talent to this project.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that's a very unique and kind of mindful approach to it. Like, people have screened unfinished things before, I mean, there's, I think, films, there are films that have even been distributed, and then when it comes out on DVD, they fix stuff, and or goes up to a streaming service these days, as the kids say. But that's because I'd been when Kathy talked a little bit about that. You talked a bit about that. I saw Adam the other day, and he mentioned that. I'm like, I wonder why, but that makes a lot of sense to me, because I've definitely fallen into the opposite end of that with the feature that I'm finishing right now, which is I'm gonna, when it's done, I'm gonna send the invitation out to people, to come see it. But I know it's sad, but I'm sure there's gonna be plenty of people who won't be able to be there for that because, they've moved, we're not all in the same place anymore. And hopefully I'll be able to give them enough of a heads up that the people who want to will be able to show up, Hopefully a lot of them want to see it. But, we'll see how it goes. But, that makes a lot of sense to me that you did that. Now, I want to get into the way that you directed this film, because I remember there was one time we were at, I forget if it was yours or Kathy's place, but I think you and her, this was years ago, both of y'all were talking, it was sort of a circle, and, you said something, and if I'm misrepresenting you here, tell me. All right, but sure. Because I may have had a few and be slightly misremembering this. I think you said, I forget what her question or statement was or something, but you said something along the lines of that you didn't like seeing other people direct on set, or you didn't like studying directing because you wanted to like form your own voice or
Yeah.
style? Is this ringing a bell with like what you think at all?
So basically, I know what you're referencing. So like what I was saying is more of like I don't want to. Like I admire directors, like some directors I really appreciate. Obviously, Christopher Nolan's number one on my list. Like Denis Villeneuve, uh,
Can't wait for Dune
director
Part 2.
Bong Joon-ho, like another great director that I admire greatly.
Absolutely.
You know, and then you've got like the George Lucases and the Steven Spielbergs that you can go far as back as like Capra and Orson Welles and
Otto Preminger.
Yeah, like
the obscurists out there.
There's so many you can kind of point to. Every one of those directors has something you can take from, like in terms of style or choice or different things you can pull from. But what I try to avoid personally is picking up habits, and I think that comes from wanting to be an actor as a kid. I like to also try to mimic. I try to
Right.
impersonate or try to take on traits to try and build a character or build an idea. I think knowing myself, I don't want to pull someone else's influence or a kind of idea of how they direct. It sounds kind of stuck up a little bit, and I don't mean it that way. It's more of the idea of like I want to find what my voice is. And I don't want to be necessarily influenced by like this person. You can watch my film and say, oh, that's a Nolan type film, or that's a George Lucas type film, or that's a whatever. I want someone to look at that and be like, huh, I've never seen it done this way.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like creating your own voice. And so that was kind of what I want to do with directing is like, I want to find my own way and like take bits and pieces and rearrange it and try on different shoes, see what fits. And that's kind of the way I wanted to get into directing. And but one thing I do like to do on set is I like to not view the monitor as much. This is something I actually took from Christopher Nolan, so I can say this isn't my genuine artificial thought or original thought, excuse me. But I like to be as much in the scene as I can be, so I can feel it. I want to be able to like feel like I'm in the scene with the actors. That I can feel their emotion. I can feel the tension in the room if it's an intense scene, or if there's heartbreak or something. I want to feel the pangs in my chest. And I think if you're too busy worrying about the framing and like monitoring, and that's where you benefit from having a good director of photography and people around you, is that you can kind of talk about it and mark it up, and then it's like you can walk away knowing that it's going to be okay, and you can focus on what's going on in front of the camera. And because that's what's important is, because that's what people are going to see. The framing is one thing, and that can invoke a lot of emotion depending on how it is and how it's placed and, how you build the shot. But in essence, it's the characters or the objects or the things you're trying to show that are going to invoke the real emotion to your audience. And I try to remove myself from the technical and get into the emotional. So that's kind of where I kind of stood on that with that kind of quote, if that answered it. Hopefully.
Yeah, I definitely am the same way when it comes to looking at monitors. Like, occasionally I'll check a take, if I'm working with someone like Adam, then I'll turn to him and be like, did we get it? Just make sure, like, did the boom get it? And he'll review it a lot of the time just to be careful as well. But I've also found that if you're in Video Village, glued to the monitor, whatever, it's a lot harder for you to get a bigger picture of how you're actually going to edit it ironically, and the reason why is because you're not as you don't necessarily get to see and hear and feel the rhythm of the scene, like literally the pacing of it. And if you're just on a close-up and then later you're looking at the reverse shot, it's like, okay, but what does this conversation actually feel like?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely the same way. And also it's a thing where I like live performances.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have the front row seat to watch the scene, and I feel my experience and belief is that it also helps the actors a lot for you to be there. There's even been times where I've kind of done the opposite on purpose, where I've literally hit record and left the room, and that did something different for what they were doing. But yeah, I mean, so I'm not like I hate monitors or either, and you're not like that. You definitely, but
they serve a purpose for a reason.
Yeah, it's like, but for the most part, I'm not glued to the monitor. I don't even think it's necessarily wrong for other people to do that, because there's plenty of people who are that way and make perfectly fine films.
Mm-hmm.
There's many ways to skin a cat. I hear people say that less and less these days, now that I think about it, but it's an expression. And so I definitely appreciate that kind of mindfulness with the actors, because even though as a director, if you're fortunate to be like having departments and department heads and you're communicating with them, really you're the head, whether you take it on or not, you're the head of the acting department.
Yeah.
It's not someone else's job to talk to the actors. In fact, it's their job to not do that. And, because that huge problems will arise with the film if people start giving the actors ideas, and it's not because ideas are a bad thing, but it still happens. But it's like, if actors are under an enormous amount of pressure, because they're the ones whose face is going to be on it. Like our names might be on our films, but their faces are on it.
Exactly.
And if we're telling them to do something that they're like, am I going to look like an idiot doing this? Like, and not like the character is going to be stupid, but like, they're putting everything out there for it. And, just a snide remark from someone who doesn't realize really what's going on can just break an actor's confidence, depending on them and the situation, I guess.
Yeah.
And that can really mess things up. Or if they're getting feedback or ideas from more than one source, it can be really confusing. What I tend to say is like, to at least, sometimes to a few people, be like, if you do have an idea, don't tell the actors, tell me about it so that they're getting it from me.
Yeah.
And it's like, because that it's just better to funnel it that way.
I find.
Anyway, that's the way I like to do it anyway. But and I didn't come up with that method myself. So it's,
I mean, one thing in particular too is it creates a safe space for the actors to feel the ability to improvise or be creative, try new things, and be not afraid to fail. And have the chance to be comfortable with you, because you're engaged with what they're doing. You're in tune with their feelings and emotions and their methods, and you can suggest something, and they look at it and go, "Well, I don't know, like if the character's would do that or whatnot." I mean, certainly in Godless, there were some situations where I had planned out with Adam like camera moves and in different angles, and then it come to the actors, and then it's like, okay, so to fit in this frame and in this box, really, and I found myself doing this sometimes, where it's like, fit in this box, and we need you to hit this mark at some point. And we would try this scene a couple times, and it was actually with Kathy and Stacey Roslick. Actually, there were some shots in there, scenes with the two of them. And it was like as simple as like entering a room, and it just never felt right. It felt forced. And because we had that dialogue, and because like we could all feel it, none of us were quite happy with it. And so it came to a point where, they felt comfortable enough to say to me, I don't think this is going to work. And then in turn, I was able to say, okay, how would you come about into this room as the character? Well, how would you get from A to B, or how would you get to the next part? And then they would do it, and it felt much more comfortable. Then we would move the camera and shift the framing and fit what they were doing, rather than trying to make them fit into necessarily like almost like a box, which is definitely a great give and take, and it provides a much more authentic and a much more organic performance, I feel, when you have that ability to be collaborative, and not just, demanding or directorial. But actually, I had a question for you. So, being a filmmaker editor, a director editor, how do, like you were saying, being away from the monitor and gives you the chance to see the edit. And I agree with that. Like, I definitely feel that. But like, how do you, as director and editor, kind of work that story? Like, is it, already in your head and you're just kind of ticking off the boxes, or are you kind of just like, as the scene's going on, or like you seeing it and just kind of like shifting things in your head and like, oh, well, that was a great moment. Like, do I take that and move it over here? And okay, so now that changes, shots 3, 4, and 5, how do you go about doing that?
Well, yeah, I think I do a lot of the things that you just said. And, it's kind of difficult to answer. I'll do my best because, every scene can be different.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's, oh man, we are out of time, and then hopefully inspiration strikes and someone realizes, oh, we can get this all in one short thing. And it's even better, and it kicks it into the next thing. That's what, you don't hope for things to go bad so that they can go good, or well. But part of it is being, even if you've only had the material for like a few hours, and the material being the script, right? Becoming as familiar with it as possible in that short amount of time. Having a mind first story, which I don't think I was particularly born with, so much as done my best and continue to do my best to develop, to just be able to plug into the channel of story, and knowing like what has to get in there and making sure that does end up in the shot. I don't do that by like looking at the monitor the whole time. A lot of that is I rely heavily on having a really great collaboration with the director of photography. And Adam will sing his praises constantly. We will sing his praises constantly, making sure that it's looking good. We're getting what we want. When Adam and I have time in advance, we do a lot of prep. And part of that's because we like doing that. It's fun for us. It's why we're here. But we will break it down even, and sometimes you can't stick to the shot list. You have to be, everybody knows, you have to be flexible with it. On the day of filming, something is very likely to happen that you want to include. Kathleen was talking about a project we did where we had sort of the blocking figured out, where Celine, the other actor, was going to be like sitting next to the bed holding her hand and sing a song, and then Celine like crawled onto the bed with her. It's a mother-daughter story, and they were just, while we were setting up, they just got really close. And I leaned over, I see this, and I lean over to Adam. I'm like, all right, forget everything we were going to do because we're going with that, and we were able to make our adjustment. The editing process for me, when I'm the one editing one of my films, which I try to not actually do, I try to work with an editor.
Yeah.
And I find that I try to, when I've worked with you, okay, there were times where we got a take and I knew you would know that was going to be the right one. Okay, and then when I saw the rough cut before I even got to talk with you about it, it was all there, you know. So there is that element of personal belief time. I don't believe whether something is good or not when it comes to cinema is actually subjective. I think there is such thing as that's good, that's not, and I don't always know the answer to that. My subjectivity is based on, like, you know, sort of how well I can navigate what I believe is an objective reality of cinema. Like, I believe cinema is a real thing out there. I don't know if metaphysical is the right term or not, but I believe it exists somehow, and we discover it in the same way that people will argue whether we discover or create mathematics. All right.
Okay.
Same concept.
Yeah.
And I'm, you know, trying to understand the art form, you know, and explore it as much as I can. And it's funny because when I think I've discovered something, you know, it's actually someone else has done it before, which just edifies my belief that it already was there. So as far as making sure that we're getting everything in the scene, I mean, the edit changes a lot. You know, I sometimes... I used to shoot for coverage more, where it's like, let's get that person, get this, get that, run the whole thing. I try to not do that anymore if I can help it. And sometimes there's scenes where, you know, shot reverse shot is totally the best thing to do. You don't want to overthink the filmmaking, you know.
Yeah.
But I try to... It's not that I don't want to have wiggle room in the edit, but I want to try and shoot a scene in some way that's makes it special or unique. And the best way I have found to do that is to be working in an environment that lets your characters interact with it. So it's not like it may as well just be a blank room.
Yeah.
You know, it's like maybe there's a ramp that one of them is on and the other isn't. Okay, well, how do we capture that? You know, and how do we, because just a shot reverse shot might not be even practical for it's like, well, maybe we're going to be just at the end of the ramp looking at both of them and the ones coming down, and we really get to see the height difference, and like maybe that's just helps us decide which one's up there based on who has the power in the conversation. So that's a lot of the way that, I mean, I try to think about it. I try to take every scene on a scene by scene basis, and I'm not even sure if I'm totally answering the question, but I need to make sure that the things that have to be communicated end up in the frame, you know, like we get it.
Yeah.
Or specifically are out of frame if that's what you're trying to do. I try to not shoot for coverage as much as I used to. A lot of my first feature is shot for coverage, but not the one I'm working on right now. But a lot of it isn't edited for coverage in a weird way. I try to get the blocking figured out before we roll, you know, because then, it will be an editing nightmare. Like, you can't be changing it too much while you're doing it as far as, like, physically where things are. You can mess with the performance a bit while you're filming it. You got to be mindful of that, because if you are doing, you know, different coverage of it, you want all the performances to match, and that's, you know, its own tricky thing of, well, who do you start with, and, you know, who gets to practice more, and which actor prefers that, and how much time do you have? So I hope I'm being somewhat articulate here, but
no, it all makes sense.
Okay, yeah, good.
Yeah, no, totally get it.
But yeah, it's I also, when I edit, I stopped worrying about continuity a long time ago. Because I'll give this guy a plug. There's a YouTube channel called This Guy Edits. It's wonderful. I had edited for years. I was out of film school, okay? I had edited my feature many times, beginning to end, different drafts, all that. And I didn't actually, I feel I didn't really know how to edit. I didn't have a lot of technique down, all right? I would watch interviews with some editors, and they'd just be like, you just gotta cut with your gut, shoot from the hip, figure out what feels right. And I'm just like, that's not helpful at all to me, because it's like, I'm like, there has to be techniques here, for this beyond just like, oh, the man, close up of a man, and then you cut to a bowl of soup, and you cut back, and now he's hungry. I'm like, yeah, but what's the technique and craft behind it that has nothing to do with like just or less to do with intuition and talent? Okay, and I finally got some of that from this guy's YouTube channel.
Interesting.
And it was at a time where I was doing more editing than I ever had in my life for other projects. I just got my first full-time job, and so I had plenty of time to experiment and practice. And this, like, the tips and tricks this guy gave me and the ones that I took were totally different than what I was doing in the timeline, and immediately made an enormous improvement on everything.
Wow.
And the way that came to fruition in my feature was the first rough cut I had of my feature was over 2 hours long. It felt like it was a 5-hour film. And it was not I mean, every rough cut is bad, right? This one in particular, I like to think was hard to watch. And then the last edit I had done of this feature before I discovered this YouTube channel, I had edited it with two thoughts in mind. Make it as short as possible and pay attention to continuity. All right. And because I think a part of that was because I was getting a little insecure about my film at that time, and so I was like, if it's shorter, people won't have to look at it as long, and they won't be able to figure out if it's good or not, like, which is an insane way to think, because that's not how it works at all. And then I was really obsessive about continuity, like, oh, this guy's here is in this shot, but in the other take, it's here. I gotta make sure that I don't mess with that at all. The guy with the YouTube channel, I'm sorry I forget your name, buddy. This guy edits. He had a video about continuity. And he's like, here's a scene edited for continuity. Now I'm going to show you the scene edited not for continuity. Or he flipped them. Or he basically showed two versions of the same scene. And he pointed out, like, this scene and he goes through and shows the one that wasn't edited for continuity but was edited for the beats of the story and the performance, and he pointed out, like, here's all the things that are wrong, like, and some of them were insane, like, oh, the actor forgot to put their jacket on, and, like, you can't, there's a line. There's definitely a line for continuity, even for me. But it was so clear how much better the scene that was actually, wow, amazing, shot for the story and the beats and the rhythm of the scene. I felt like an idiot, like, for doing it the other way. And so around this time, quarantine happens, lockdown, or a little while, well, it doesn't matter. Lockdown happened, and I had all the footage for my feature practically memorized at that point. And because I just, been working on it forever.
File names for days.
Oh, yeah. But at the beginning of lockdown, I decided there were two things I was going to do, because even then I was like, there's no way this is going to be 2 weeks. Is like, I'm like, I don't know why I knew that it was going to be more than that when they were saying 2 weeks lockdown, let's do it. I'm like, that's not going to happen. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try and finish this one short film I was working on, which I did. Awesome. And I was like, I'm going to recut my feature based on the stuff that I've been learning and practicing at my full-time job for like a year up to that point or something. And I was like, I feel like I've practiced, I've learned these techniques. I'm going to try and do a new cut of my film from the beginning, new timeline, like totally from scratch.
Start over.
Yeah. And I went through scene by scene.
Yeah.
And went through and realized there's all this really good footage I wasn't using because I was obsessing over that versus that, you know, and I'm like, wow, that's a really great moment. Oh, that's so much funnier. And I could tell while I was doing it, like, this is working now. Like, this is actually it feels like a movie, you know? And by the time I was done with it, it came in, I think it was like 10 minutes under what the last cut I did was. The one that I was trying to cut to be as short as possible and stuff. Not only was it was better, I love the pacing in my feature. And like I love the pacing, I love the humor. Like I'm really excited about my film. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. But
that's awesome.
I love the edit that I have for it, and weirdly enough, it came in shorter than the other one, which I wasn't trying to make it short. I was like, it's like there's no such thing as a movie that's too long. There's just bad pacing. It's like, I love the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Tolkien's the anniversary of, I think it's the 50th anniversary of his death is coming up on September 2nd. And the 20th anniversary of The Return of the King is going to be this December. It's a big year for Tolkien fans, and so I'm probably going to do at least one more marathon, you know, and it's like, yeah, I will, like, if I have time and drop of a hat, I'll be like, yeah, I'll watch Fellowship of the Ring again right now or whatever. I will never get sick of those movies, and they go by in a flash. Those are the
always
longest
extended editions.
Always, yeah, and I have them in 4K, and oh my gosh, they are insane. What happened? I can't believe it's like, oh, Peter Jackson makes World War I footage look like it was shot yesterday, and then he took the footage from The Lord of the Rings and like total. It's incredible. And yeah, so but. My whole point is I love watching long movies if they're good, you know, or have or paced well, all that. And yeah, so it really is how people say. You tell the story at least 3 times: when you write it, when you shoot it, when you edit it. The weird thing is that I wasn't actually capable of writing or shooting the type of film I wanted to make at the time. Like, I knew what kind of movie I wanted to do, and I knew I was getting it some of the time, but there were problems with the script. Like, there were too many people were repeating themselves too much because for some reason I thought the audience was going to forget the thing that happened 2 scenes ago, and it's like, no, don't just start the scene later, you know? And and at, you know, by the end of this cut, I've now been able to see, oh my gosh, I have the movie that I wanted to make, that I wasn't even really capable of, I'd say fully capable, because I could write, if I want it to be funny, I can write funny stuff, you know? It's like, and I can direct humor and
it's
comedy.
Very hard to do.
Well, yeah, it's like, but I've watched the films I've made with enough people who have laughed during them who didn't know me. I believe I can do it. I have the proof. Not everything necessarily, but I'm very comfortable with making things that are funny. And it's a blast. But yeah, when I was writing it, it was a bloated script, you know, and the shooting, we overshot the movie. Like, we filmed too much stuff, which was great because I was able to get rid of the enormous amount of fat I had on this thing. And now I've got a really lean, funny sci-fi film that I'm working on endlessly, and it's moving forward. Like I'm not dragging my feet on it. Like it's just a lot, you know.
Yeah.
But
I know.
yeah, you know, it's like you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've kind of been going on here for a bit, but yeah, there's not really a full. I guess the shortest answer I can give to how I manage to pull off making sure I get what I want is my mind is fully in it. I live and breathe it all the time, and and that's why I'm able to keep track of it. Occasionally, it's like tools like shot lists help, checking what you're doing, but it really is like being really plugged into what the story is and what it needs to have, and just interfacing with that, just having that in mind. I'm able to keep track of it. And whenever it's like a little ritual. Every time we have a day of filming somewhere, like if we're shooting a whole short in a day, or, or there's just a scene, or whatever. Before I say that's a wrap, I will go by myself, even if it's just like 6 feet that way, or like I'll sit down or something, and I will just run through everything we did in like a few minutes, and like just kind of watch a time lapse of our day in my head, and make sure like, okay, we've got when the character picks that thing up, or when they pass it to them, we have all of their lines, and I'll go through it. And sometimes I'll go through it knowing that if we don't have it, it's too late. Yeah. But I have to know now. And but fortunately we keep track of it while we're doing, so that hasn't happened yet, fingers crossed, But yeah, and then I'll get up or, turn back. I'll just be like, all right, we have everything. That's a wrap, And so I do kind of do a mental check at the end, which has become its own little ritual. And maybe that's kind of crazy. It's like, well, you don't have like a list you check off. It's like I have it in my head, and I try to not shoot for coverage if I can help it, if I think there's a better way. Mm-hmm. And, but yeah, it's, every scene can be different. Not every scene is different, but every scene can be different. Yeah. And I try to have an idea of what the rhythm and beats are for how it will be edited later. But even though it may change drastically, whether there's not, aside from shooting for coverage, there's not necessarily a ton that I'm aware of that I can do to give the editor way more wiggle room. And by shooting for coverage, I include meaning like, getting inserts and stuff like that, which can save the day. But yeah, that's I guess that's kind of an answer. So,
I think you got it.
All right, cool. Let me throw one back at you then. Okay. You have a background or foundation, we might say, in acting. Mm-hmm. Writer, directed this film. Your co-writer, Kathleen, is the lead actor. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a bit about what the relationship between you as a director and her as an actor is, while you're both also the writers? Is there anything special there?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, I mean, it's hard to separate sometimes, whether you're the writer or the producer or the director, especially at this level, like, because you have to wear 12 hats rather than just being able to say, I'm the director or I'm the producer. You have to, like, in a matter of an hour, you've now become 4 different roles. But what I think we definitely made a conscious effort to do, and we, made sure that when we're on set, it's like, for lack of better, just direction, it's I'm the director in this moment, and Kathy's the actor in this moment. And that doesn't mean a hierarchy. That doesn't mean, ideas and what like are shot down.
Hang on, I'm going to cut in real quick.
Yeah.
Does that really mean there isn't a hierarchy? Because I hear people say, I don't want you to think of me as your boss. It's like, hang on. Sometimes when it, like, at some point it might get down to it.
True.
Where does, like, how to. And you talked a little bit about like Kathy and Stacy being comfortable enough to say, I don't think this is going to work, because there is the collaboration there.
Yeah.
But but is there really not a hierarchy there?
I mean, there's a traditional hierarchy in the sense of, when it comes down to it, my role as director should be the final say in terms of, like, this is the direction we're going. This is the voice of the story. Like, this is where we're going with it, and, so on and so forth. But in the moment, when it's, like I was saying earlier about, like, the collaboration and whatnot, it's not necessarily like you're an actor, like, I'm not listening to what you're saying. I have, like you were talking about as well, like with shot lists or things like that. It's like, it's not on here, it's not on the sheet, so we're not doing that. It's more of, like, let's collaborate, let's work together. And it does help that, we are both the writers of, for Godless Children. It does help that we both have an idea of what the story is, beyond just the, an actor reading the script and coming up with character and backstory and things like that. We also have a deeper understanding because we know where this story is going or where these things are going. And it's kind of harder for Kathy, I would believe. And we've talked about it before, but, you have to now eliminate all of that to be on camera, because now you can't know that your character is going to, have this happen to them, or they're going to run into that person, or you don't know the motivation of the person you're talking to, even though as the writer you do. So in those moments, it's kind of easier to shut that out and be like, okay, now, well, easier being like, it's probably the better choice to just tune all of that out, and now it's just time to be director and actor. But what's been great in this whole process, 2.5 years, has been we kind of understand what our roles are and how to work together in those roles. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been perfect the whole time. I'm sure, hopefully, Kathy iterated that a little bit, but the thing is that what we've gained from this experience is learning how to take ideas, thoughts, and figure out how the story comes together. So in the writing process, it was, basically we would both come up with an idea, we'd come up with an outline, and then Kathy would go and write, just write, put it all on paper. Who cares what it looks like? Who cares what it sounds like? Just get it out there. And then I would come in, do a little bit of editing in terms of, let's change some grammar here. Let's tighten it up a little bit. Let's trim the fat away. And then give it back to Kathy. And it would be like, she'd check to make sure that she didn't lose something, that she was intention of character and whatnot. And we just kind of work back and forth and kind of really kind of dense it down. So then when you come on set, it's a kind of a similar feeling. It's like, okay, we know where we want to go in this story, but now when we get onto set, maybe the mood of the set has changed. Maybe feeling with the characters have changed, because now you see them. Now you get to be in that moment. Maybe now what you thought like 6 months ago when you were writing this scene has gone out the window. It's the same scene. We haven't changed the dialogue, haven't changed the intention, but now that you're here, it's a little different. So being able to take away and say, I'm no longer the writer, I'm now the director and an actor. We're here in this room or in this space. What is our motivation to get to where we want to get, and how do we get there, and does it still fit in this space? And that's something that it took a little time to get. I mean, I think we've done some stuff together prior to this. Did some like shorts and things as well. So it helped, kind of build that, trust and that understanding. But yeah, through this process, it was definitely something that we worked towards and definitely started to get the hang of as time went on, for sure.
It even sounds like it was more helpful that she like wrote with you because she does have that familiarity, and you both are, like, in some cases even literally on the same page with the character and the story. But yeah, like you said, even just you go into a location and the entire tone of the space is different than what you maybe had in mind when you were writing it before you figured out where you're going to film it sometimes, which I think is just, the moments I live for. It's so exciting. But that's fantastic. So I understand that you're going to be putting this film out into festivals, perhaps hoping for some distribution, as well. And that I talked with Kathy also that said you both have some ideas that you're tossing back and forth together, and a couple that you really like and all that. So y'all are going to continue your collaboration.
Yeah.
Then that's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't the end. So this is only the beginning. And I kind of alluded to this earlier when we were talking is, whatever we learn from this, we can take to the next one. And, as hard as it was to do this first feature and the hard, emotionally, physically, mentally, and all the things, all the failures and all the, trials and tribulations I went through it, we can learn from that and then take it to the next. And now it's not going to be as difficult. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be different challenges probably, but we're more equipped than we were before. And that's exciting. And so now it's it's not, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Well, I never want to do this again. It's now okay, we've learned all this. What's next? And for us, we've definitely come to a point where we have a laundry list of ideas. Some of them in different stages. Some are in outline form. Some have written scenes for, starting scripts on a couple. It's getting to that point where, you just have something that, as a filmmaker and as an actor or as a writer, it's it's just something you have to feel. And when it's not there, you almost are seeking it. It's that chase, that desire to get some absolute gratification from telling these stories and creating environments and creating character. And I mean, you could probably speak to this as well, is that when you step on set and you see it playing before you, it's a feeling unlike any other that you can describe. And and then you come to the edit room and you're like, what the hell was I doing? But at the same time, even then you're still I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm seeing, for better or worse, the fruits of that chase. And that's what keeps bringing me back, and thankful to have someone like Kathy that has that same desire and has that same discipline as well. We have a process and a writing process and a creative process where we keep each other on track and we hold each other accountable to produce these projects and to come up with these ideas, and so that we don't necessarily go, oh, this would be fun, and then it sits on a shelf for forever. It's more of let's go down this road, and maybe also having the courage to say this isn't right now. And so you have that idea that you're so excited about, and we actually had this happen, which led to Godless. Actually, there was a different film that I actually started coming up with, and we had gone to the point where we had the whole film outlined. We had index cards per scenes. We were acting them out just to figure it out, all this stuff, and we worked on it for a couple months. And then it came to a point where in my gut, Kathy sensed it before I did, but in my gut, it finally came to a point where I was like, I don't know if this is the right time to tell this story. And so one time during one of our writing meetings, I just said, I don't know if I don't think we can do this. And she's like, yep, you're right. And so we shelved it. It's still an idea that we'll come back to, but it's not the right time. And then we went and made Godless, and now here we are 2.5 years later. But it's it's one of those things where having that trust and having that understanding and starting to build something, which now has taken almost 3 years to make, in terms of the friendship and the creative partnership, what that has offered both of us and what we continue to do is fuel that fire and allow us to be confident in the direction we're going.
Yeah. And time spent writing is never time wasted.
Exactly.
Especially for writing, because I used to get so frustrated where I would write way more stuff than I would ever make, and I was like, when I was younger and more naive, I was like, oh man, I'm writing this thing, and then I'd be, I'm not going to even get to make this thing, I'm not going to make this or whatever, or even if I could make this someday, I'd want to make something else, like, even though I think this is cool, it's not like what I really have, whatever. But by doing that, I'm still spending time writing and getting better at writing and interfacing with story more. And for you, especially collaborating with this partner. And so, there's plenty of people out there, like people who are, I don't want to say just in like a flippant way, but who are just writers, they write scripts. That's it. They all have tons of features that they know are never going to get made. It's like, well, why write them? Because the whole point of writing a script is to turn it into a movie, right? It's like, not exactly. Sometimes the point of writing a screenplay is helping you be able to write stuff that can get made into movies, even if it's not that one, and I mean, that doesn't mean it isn't enormously frustrating. Very much.
It's hard to say no.
Yeah, and it's, you put time into it. Like, I mean, and of course there's the, bit of old farm equipment from the Cracker Barrel that I'm afraid is going to fall on me, metaphorically, of like, I've spent a lot of time on my feature. It's not done yet. I believe in the film, and sometimes I, wonder, like, I also kind of think, like, you have to believe in your film till the very end. It's like, even if things aren't going well, you just, if you're the one who's heading up this production, you have to believe in it once you've started going.
Yeah.
And so I maybe... I hope I'm not just blindly believing in my film. I hope it's going to be good. But it's like, yeah, that was the adventure of my 20s. It's like some people, I mean, I did a lot of stuff in my 20s, right? But there's, sometimes people talk about their great adventure that they had. And mine was, working on this film that's not done yet. And it's like, when it's done, maybe I'm completely wrong with my eyes right now. This thing might be a train wreck. You know, I don't think so. And some of the people who've seen bits of it seem to think it's all right. Maybe they're being nice. Maybe I'm crazy. I should, But who knows? But
we all are there.
But either way, even if that film ends up being a complete and unmitigated famous disaster of my life, I still have gotten enough out of it for it to be worth it, as just the experience I've had and the learning of it. Because whether your first film is good or not, I mean, like, in general, anybody, whether your first film is good or not, it is first off going to be very difficult to do. And your first feature specifically is going to be very difficult to do, and you will, unless you are very stubborn in admitting your own mistakes, you will learn a lot on it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't, at the moment, the way I've felt for the whole time is, if I could go back and not try to make this film, I would still go back and do it. Like, I would still, this is what I would do. So it's like, I wish it hadn't, I wish it wouldn't take this long, but it'll be ready when it's ready. Yeah. And I'm and even though I'm doing that, I can still develop other features. I'm not going to like really properly kick off another feature until that one's done. I might have written a few, or whatever, but it's we'll see. But all this to say, like to like talking about me, to bring it back to you, is congratulations, man.
Well, thank you.
Congratulations. I'm like, I'm not a jealous person. When I see someone has finished their feature, I'm ecstatic. And I am so, like, as much as I can be from where I am, I'm so proud of you and Kathleen for getting this, that like you've been working on it for a while, and it's so cool to like just see how you've approached this thing as much as I've been able to see, and I'm really excited to see it this weekend, and I'm so glad that I put 2 and 2 together, that you're going to be in town so that we're able to do this.
Yeah, I'm glad you gave the call, because, and I agree with what you said, is anytime that someone around our level, or even just any filmmaker in general, like especially when you just feel very excited and ecstatic was a great word to use, is, we got to support each other. We got to build each other up. I mean, it's hard. It's a hard process, like to go out and make something like that, regardless of how it's perceived, how the film is, the quality, just the fact that you did it is like something to be very proud of, and should be recognized. And I appreciate that. And also the same to you. Like, when
don't jump the gun yet.
Hey, I mean, to get to this point though, and still be working on it at least. And at least having just said, scrap it, like that's huge. And so, I'm glad that you hit me up and asked me to come in, because it's chances like this don't come as often as you'd like, and so being able to just sit down and talk about what we both love to do, is pretty great.
Absolutely. And I said this to Kathleen, but anytime you're in town, if you just want to be on the podcast, or if you have a project that you want to promote or something, the door's always open, so to speak. I'd love to have you on again.
Yeah.
It's great talking with you.
It was a fantastic time.
Everyone, that's been another episode here. Thanks for joining us. If you just can't wait for the next one, there's a bunch of older ones, and we'll see you there. And if you let your mind imagine just a bit, it'll seem like it's not been recorded a very long time ago. So there we go. Have a good one, everybody. Thanks. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to start your own podcast, why wait? Reach out to us at StudioME.me, and I hope you hear me again soon.